Stop Spammers is a plugin that's been in development on the WordPress repository for 8 to 9 years now. We're on to version 2021.6. All of our versions are by the year and then the subsequent release within that year. So we will keep going through 2021 until we get to the next year and then start fresh with 2022. Right now, we have about 1.3 million downloads, and the plugin is active on over 60,000 websites. We do have a premium version available with more features that is covered in a separate video. So you can install the plugin one of two ways, which is typical for plugins that are on the repository. You can download it directly from the repository, or from your website admin, you can search for it in the plugin installation page. Okay, once you install it, you will have the ability to go to settings from the plugin installation page or from the submenu, which has a bunch of different segments that we'll go through in this video. We'll start with summary, which is more of a control panel. It'll always list the current version of the plugin, as well as the IP address that you're using to access your website. It'll indicate down below how many spam comments that it's prevented, and all the different ways that spam is being blocked.
Do you mind if I ask you a question or questions throughout this? When you said that it's giving you a summary of the spammers that it's stopped, is that stop spammers all together with every installation and everybody that's using it, or is that just me?
Oh, that is just you. So it'll start at 0. It's a very good question. And the installation date.
Okay.
So this one was captured on 2/12, which was the original installation of the plugin on this website. If you remove it and then re-add it, it'll save those settings. But you can clear the summary, so you go revert back to starting from 0. So the control panel then has a bunch of different boxes, info boxes with the corresponding submenus that describe what each submenu offers.
And these are all available in the free version?
Yes.
Okay.
Until we get down to the premium options, which lists out a few of the different aspects of premium. And then we have the beta options below, which we probably will be just incorporating into the free options above. That is one of the really goals that we have, is to just make sure that these are ready for average everyday users to utilize. So let's go to the protection options first. And the first option that we have is form checking. And before I go into each of the options, we do have the ability to navigate to the documentation. So if I click on the question mark, it'll bring up the corresponding section that talks about the feature in greater detail. So form checking is an option for people who have maybe a complex plugin like WooCommerce, where the compatibility is in doubt. If that's the case, and there are some compatibility issues with stop spammers working with a certain third-party plugin, it is something that will offer you the ability to still check for spam against the core WordPress fields, such as registration, comments, and login, while also not having stop spammers aggressively checking the third-party plugins. So we do make sure that our plugin is compatible with a lot of the different popular third-party plugins like bbPress and Contact Form 7. But with so many out available on the repository and through other means, it's one nice option as a fallback, just in case there are some compatibility issues with Stop Spammers and another plugin. Members only mode is one of our newer features, and that just allows an admin to require users to be logged in to be able to view the site. And by default, this one is disabled as well. And then we have a prevent lockouts section, which prevent lockouts.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. With that members only mode, how does it, if you turn it on, does it what does it display for the user that they can't see the site?
Okay. So if I try and go to if I try to go to the home page, which would be just tonovo.com, which is our test site, I'm automatically redirected to login.
Okay. And whatever the login for the website, that's just what it's going to see.
Exactly.
And for most people, they would probably see the WordPress login window. Okay.
Exactly. Let me re-enable premium. So we see the actual login form rather than the shortcode. So if you have Stop Spammers Premium, you'll just be redirected to the themed login if you have that enabled.
Okay. So that's a feature within the premium.
Yes.
Okay.
So to prevent lockouts, we have a couple different features that are enabled by default. And one is to automatically add the admin accounts to the allow list. And then another one is to check credentials on every single login attempt. That one can be disabled to assist with lockout prevention. Clicked on allow lists.
Okay.
And then from here, we can see the IP addresses that are either enabled from having admins sign in from them specifically, or from past allow list requests that have come from visitors who may have been false positives who send an email requesting access. Once that access is approved, their IP address and their email go into this box as well.
And you need to turn it on?
You don't need to enable it, but if you also want to enable allowing people by specific usernames,
oh, okay,
you have to enable this.
I got you.
All right, I'll navigate back to protection options. Another fairly new feature of ours is notification control. We have a couple options that are shown in free, and then we also have more granular features in premium. And the free options, by default, you will now see an option to hide plugin nags or notifications. So if I go back to the plugins page, I'll see the keep hidden button underneath any type of plugin notices. A lot of times, if websites have a whole bunch of plugins installed and activated, then they'll see all kinds of spam that pushes the main content of the admin pages all the way down the page. And so we can choose to keep that information hidden from the various plugins. And if I go to notification control, by default, the two buttons will be enabled to keep the hidden, or to show the keep hidden button, and then to show the hide all notices button. The hide all notices button is a premium option, so that will just take you to the Stop Spammers plugin, premium plugin download page. You can hide both of these buttons though. So if you want just the keep hidden button to show on those boxes, you can disable this. Or if you don't want to see either button in the plugin notices, you can hide both. It is permanent for that user, and it's permanent on a specific notice from the plugin. So if there's another plugin that has a different notice, that notice will appear and you'll have to select keep hidden for that one as well.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, some of the core functionality is now within the validate requests section. And a lot of these are enabled by default because they've been shown to be pretty accurate in determining who is spamming the website and who isn't. So the first feature within validate requests, block spam missing the HTTP accept header. That is something that when a regular user accesses a website, this header is in the browser information. And so typically spammers are, if they're head of their own programs, then they are going to be submitting forms or trying to register without this header information. So that is going to identify where there's no header and block a spammer. The next one on the list is block invalid HTTP refer. And kind of similarly to the header, if there's not a refer, that's a big red flag that this is not normal human behavior. Regular user would navigate to a website and into a login page and proceed from there. But if a bot is just pounding away at a script from out of nowhere, that's a pretty big red flag. Then we have block disposable email addresses. So we have a blacklist of disposable email addresses that are manually maintained for the time being. We are considering options to have something that's a little bit more dynamic for some of these lists or arrays of different IP addresses. But that is something we're still in the works with. So for now, we just have for some of these checks more static lists of known bad actors. So the next one then is check for long. And actually, I'll just talk through the next two because they're very similar, check for long and check for short. And a lot of times we found that if somebody's trying to register with a very long or very short username or email, that they're often not a real human. So for long, it would just be some insanely long character string, or if it's really short, it could be like 1@1.com, something like that.
Now, when you say check, what does that mean, check?
So by checking, it's just saying, okay, if something doesn't, for the email, for example, if something doesn't exceed 5 characters, it's likely going to be a faked email. So block this bot from accessing the registration and disallow them from creating an account.
Is there a log somewhere that shows me that someone tried with that email address?
Yes. To access the log, go to the log report submenu. And this will explain all of the different checks that it's doing at any given time. So it has authenticated me for the most part. This is a test website, so a lot of the records here will be just me, but there are a couple where it was blocking a 404 exploit attempt, which we'll get to. There was one that was a bad cache effort, so it was blocked.
So if there was someone that was trying to log in with 1.1.com, for example, it would show that they were blocked and that was the email address?
I don't know for sure if it will show the email address, but it will explain that it was blocked for the reason that the email address or username was too short.
Now, is it, let's say that was valid. Is there a place that I can go in, or we can go in and add an exception to say, yes, this is okay to let
Yes.
that email through?
Yes. So if it was valid, if it was a false positive, and there was actually a person behind the request who maybe has just a very short email address, for example,
Mhm.
what they can do is fill out the request form, and the admin of the website tied to the general,
Mhm.
the settings general, I believe, this admin will receive a communication request to add that person to the allow list. So once they add them to the allow list, if we go back to the allow list area, you can see that there aren't any current pending requests, but theirs will show up, and we have a thumbs up or thumbs down, and we can mark thumbs up, and then it'll place their IP address. And also one of our new features is that it'll place their email too, because we've noticed that a lot of times people will these days sign in from a lot of different IP addresses.
So, for example, when you were just saying about submitting a form, what form are you talking about them submitting? Anything specific?
That's a very good question. Let me see if I can.
Because I use a program called WP40, which is an online discussion forum. And they have a registration form in their system. And Stop Spammers has worked tremendously at blocking spammers who were just registering with garbage.
Oh, okay.
So it worked really well. But I'm just curious, if someone tried to come in and register that should be allowed to register, how would we know that they were being blocked? And how could we allow them, and that kind of stuff?
Yes, that's a very good question. So the log report will assist with knowing how people are being blocked when they're not completing the second chance request form. And you can allow, let's see, so the log report will go up to 150 records before it starts clearing the information from the database so that it doesn't get too bloated. From the second chance perspective, if somebody does complete the registration request, they will be looking at something that looks okay. This is what the allow request will look like. So let me just go back. So I'm accessing Tremonti from a Tor browser, and we'll get to the Tor blocker feature, but I'm trying to register with this email address. If I click register, I get something called allow request. It says access denied. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to list the email address that I was trying to use to register or leave a comment.
All right, let's back up just a second for me.
Oh, sure.
Hit back a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is this form a form from Stop Spammer?
The register form is not. This is WooCommerce.
Okay, so it's just some other, right?
Yes, it's white labeling the core WordPress registration form.
Okay, so the reason that it's probably blocking this email address is what? Because it's short?
Because I'm accessing the website through the Tor browser.
Okay, so because you're accessing it through the Tor browser,
Yes.
what's causing it to happen?
It's activating the check called check for Tor exit points.
Okay.
So it goes through each of these checks and it says if any of them are enabled and any of them apply to somebody trying to register or make a comment, etc., then activate the access denied second chance request form.
Is there any place, rather than making you do it right now, but is there any place that explains exactly what each of these is doing? Like check for Tor exit nodes. What does that mean? Or
Yes.
check.
If you go to the question mark, it'll take you to the documentation. So for example, Tor would be here.
Okay, great. Okay.
So some of them are a little self-explanatory, but others are pretty involved. So the check for quick responses, for example, that we'll get to, is at any time you can access the documentation through stopspammers.io/documentation. And we have listed by submenu what the different features are. So if you go to something like web services, you can see all of the different features that are listed on that submenu. And then here's where you can see all of them listed out. So just go back to protection options. On the admin side of the website, we were just trying to register. We can see that there were 2 attempts from that same email address. It lists 2 different reasons. So the way that Stop Spammers works is it just goes down the list. And so the first time it sees something it doesn't like, it says, okay, blocked. And then it gives that reason that it didn't like it for. So it didn't even reach the Tor, or maybe it did with the bad cache, but not necessarily with the stop form spam integration, which is a web service, a third-party web service.
So what does bad cache mean?
Okay, so I was blocked from my first attempt because my first attempt flagged the stop form spam service that was enabled. Now on my second attempt, it knows that I was already blocked. So now my IP address is under bad cache, and it can just say, oh, well, I've blocked you before, so I'm blocking you again.
Gotcha.
So back to the end user who's using Tor currently. Okay, so if I'm using Tor and I'm being blocked, but I know that I'm a real person, when I get to the allow request form, I can just say, okay, here's the email that I'm trying to register with. Say something like this and submit the request. I'll get a confirmation, and then now the web admin will have to go in and approve that. So I'm logged in as the web admin. I will get an email, but I can also go into the dashboard and see that a request has been sent. If you click on the link, it'll take you to the allow list submenu, and then actually both requests came through. So I can then say, okay, this person is real. I'm going to add them, or I'm going to block them, or I'm just going to delete the request. And if you add it, it's the same person that's making the request. It'll add both rows. It sees that, it recognized that that was a duplicate. So it should add it to there it is, the last line.
Okay.
Let's go back to protection options. We left off with the long and short emails. BBC codes, not really something that is used. I can't even really remember what they were for. I think it was just an old way of communicating in comments, but it's probably just helpful to have and keep enabled in case there are any lingering old bots out there that are still trying to add information in that old markup language that was used for forums.
Mhm.
The next two, check for periods and hyphens, are just looking at multiple characters in emails and usernames. So check for periods greater than 2, it will block. And then check for hyphens greater than 1, it will block. So by default, these are disabled because they might be too aggressive in certain circumstances. But if you are getting a lot of spam and you're seeing that much of it is somebody with
Right.
an email like, okay, check for quick responses. So this is something that you can use to see if somebody's trying to comment too fast in the specified time right now. I think by default it's 4 seconds. So this timeout value is used to determine if the spammer has filled out the form too quickly.
Okay.
And a lot of times humans will take at least 10 seconds to complete a comment form. Okay. Next, block 404 exploit probing. I am not 100% sure what this one does. I think this is more for XSS attacks.
Mhm.
And so by default, this one's enabled. Block IPs detected by Akismet. One of the nice things about Stop Spammers is that we do focus on compatibility with other popular security plugins, and Akismet would be one of them. WordFence is another. In fact, WordFence developers have recommended also using Stop Spammers in addition to WordFence for additional security. Check for exploits is just looking for general bad behavior within the JavaScript or things such as SQL injection attempts. Deny login attempts using admin in the username. This is more WordPress security 101, just to make sure that nobody on the website is trying to use admin as their admin credentials. Could probably also include administrator in that block as well, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who type a full word out as well. So the check against list of Ubiquity, Novus, and other spam server IPs, that's another, in fact, the next two are just IP arrays. So just lists of things that IP addresses that Stop Spammers knows to check against when these settings are enabled. Check for Tor exit nodes. So this is when somebody would be accessing the website through the Tor browser.
Okay.
Check for many hits in a short time. It will, by default, block more than 10 comments or 10 comments or login attempts in less than 3 minutes. And you can also set that to as few as 4 comments or logins in as few as 1 minute. Or any mix and match of the different options from the dropdown. Check for Amazon Cloud. That's another IP address array to check for. By default, I think this one's disabled. Filter login requests. Instead of just protecting forms that it finds on the front end, it's looking for login attempts in the programmatic sense. So maybe the forms aren't necessarily publicly accessible, but there's a way of completing a form that doesn't require going to a web page. This check will look for those forms and guard against those ones as well.
Okay.
Then we get to the list of countries, and these can be, you make your own customized list of countries. If you're seeing specific ones that are more spammy than others, you can check them and block those IP ranges. So we can go to the allow list now. And there aren't any current pending requests. So anytime somebody fills out the second chance request to be allowed, that will show up here. Let me just quickly go to challenge and block. The one thing that can be done is you can disable the allow request form. So if you have the allow request form and a Captcha enabled on that request form and are still getting a bunch of spam, then you can just block it outright. And anybody who's accessing the website and is blocked because of one check or the other, they won't have that second ability to send a request to the administrator for access.
And with the Google Recaptcha, I know that there's multiple types, 2 and 3, and
Yes.
Checkbox. Is there a particular one that we need to use?
Yes, it has to be the version 2. Version 3 is on our list to support, but for the time being, because a lot of people still like to use version 2, we just kept to that one. So for the Google and Solve Media, those ones do require the site keys, but arithmetic is just something that should be enabled by default when this setting is selected.
Okay.
Go back to allow lists. So the first option, if we don't have any allow list request, is that we can personalize what the allow list can include by adding IP addresses and emails, and also by allowing usernames to be added here. The reason we don't recommend usernames is because they can be guessed fairly easily, but if you have the admin ability to create a username called admin blocked, that's at least one thing that's not going to be found here. So you could enable this and just add some usernames. Then we get to the different allow options. A lot of these are IP arrays. So if you have an e-commerce website that connects to one of the different payment gateways, we have the IP address arrays listed out so that if you're using any of these, you can make sure that there's no false positive blocking going on.
Great.
So all of these are just lists of IP addresses.
Okay.
Block lists looks pretty similar to the allow list because we'll have this IP address, email block, and then for this example, I do have enable block by username. So there are a couple ones that have been blocked, a couple of usernames that have also been blocked. We have a list of words that we've identified as being very tied to spam comments that are listed out. There's about 200 or 300. That's enabled by default, and then you can add your own.
And where will these words be blocked from?
So they are blocked from the default list that we have. And then we also have the ability to add some here and save below.
Well, I guess what I mean is, you have the word hello in there, for example.
Mhm.
If someone enters the word hello, where does it get blocked? Do
Oh,
things
I
get
see.
blocked?
That's a good question. So the comments mainly, and so what Stop Spammers is doing, these ones were all entered after the fact, because you can see that they um, kind of go in alphabetical order. So the default list is here, and then we have some that are being proactively blocked by the Stop Spammers plugin when it's associating comments with spammers. One of the newer features that we have is also URL shortening services. So if there are any links to any of these guys, then the block will be activated. A lot of times spammers like to conceal the links that they have in comments using URL shorteners. Check bad agents user list. This is blocking. This is so bad user agents list is just looking for missing user agent, because that's oftentimes going to signify that it was a spam software. And then the blocked TLDs is a way of just adding things like .cn or .net. So just more control rather than just blocking specific
Right,
content.
right. Okay, cool.
Going to challenge and block, we do have the ability to customize the blocked message that appears at the very top of the screen when the access request is being
Okay.
viewed. Routing and notifications.
Mm-hmm.
So we could send a visitor to another web page, maybe terms of service, rather than sending them to a request form if they're blocked.
Oh, so that's okay for the block. Okay.
And then if you have this enabled, you can then specify the redirect URL.
Okay.
By default, this one's on, off, and this one's on. So the request form is just the form that the user will see when they've been blocked, and they can add their email and a comment. So the send visitor to another web page, you can, if you enable this, specify the web page that they will be navigated to, like terms of service or privacy policy. The blocked users to see the blocked users see the allow request form. This is the form that they will see once they've been blocked if that's enabled, and they can add their email address and a little message in the free text field. Notify web admin when a user request is added to the allow list. So a lot of times, if no Captcha is enabled, then some sites can see a lot of emails just from requests, because spam bots do sometimes have the ability to send this request form. And so they'll see a bunch of emails being sent that request form is coming from spammers. So you could have this just disabled altogether if you don't want to enable any type of Captcha. And you can also specify, if it is enabled, where this email should be sent. If this is disabled, you'll still see the request in the allow list page or in the dashboard under the at a glance box. And then we also have a fairly new feature to notify the requester when the access has been granted and they've been added to the allow list. And then for the Captcha option, if there are a lot of request forms being sent, you can enable any of these three Captchas. Okay, web services. By default, the plugin will check two different web services. So we have different lists that'll check against. One example is spamhouse.org.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also looking up against the stop forum spam database. There are a few other optional integrations. They will require a key. So stop forum spam, it doesn't require a key to use it, but it does require a key if you want to send information back. So that page is pretty straightforward. Then we get to the good cache and bad cache. We don't save a lot in the bad cache or good cache, but you can increase the size of these, higher these, and we can clear the cache to download of data is possible. The one thing is that our report clears records beyond what is specified. So if it's specified at 100, the 101st record will be cleared. The premium feature does allow you to export this information.
Okay.
But currently there's no like automated way, so it would just have to be exported.
That's fine.
Each time.
Okay.
That is all in the cache section.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a little bit about the log report. So we can have up to 150 records displayed before we start clearing records to save on database space. We can search for a specific day within these logs. And then the other thing is that there is an option to clear recent activity, kind of like the cache page. So if I select this, then it will wipe all of the logs from the database. The next section, which is diagnostics, this is really helpful. So the option testing is something you can do to see if you are going to create a request or registration attempt or comment that will be blocked. So it'll tell you your server address. You can use a different one if you want to. You can then just do something like this as your email.
Now, what is this doing? This is.
So this is going to see what checks are triggered by what information you've used here.
Oh, that's great.
And so you can either test countries or test options. We'll do options test. And it will say, looks like everything was good there. It found a spam word in the comments and the post request. Oh, that's just because we're doing diagnostic testing from here, but it did flag one thing, which would be the spam word that it used. So this example would not pass if someone were to leave a comment in this. There are a couple other diagnostic tools below the testing. So you can export all the different options. All the different settings. So in premium, this would just export as a file. Show PHP info, you can see the, and then the last thing is the threat scan, which must have already run. And it'll just look through the posts, links, users, comments, etc. And then also the PHP files and look and see if there's anything that looks nefarious. There is a little note down here. These are warnings only, so sometimes false positives will show. For example, I know like a lot of people like to use this way of calling a file in CSS, so or in PHP for their style sheets. So thread scan is more just a tool if you're really knowledgeable about what to look for and what the errors or the potential issues might be. And then license key and premium features. So the premium features is just going to show the different settings that are available within premium if it's enabled. The license key will also, oops, I probably should have